Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you today how to do this really simple little bracelet. It's a little drop zigzag bracelet, and it's made using rullas and teardrops and 8 OC beads. So for my 8 OC beads, I'm using a transparent gray color. For my rullas, I am using the opaque red dark tavertine. And for the drop, I'm using the opaque cream in the drop color. In addition to your seed beads, you're going to need some beading needles. This project does require 2 needles. You can also do it with 1 needle, but for beginners, it's really easy to do with 2 needles. So you're doing 2 needles, and these are size 10 English beading needles. In addition to that, I have a clasp that I'm going to put on. You can use any sort of clasp, that's up to you. I have my thread burner that I use to cut my thread off my large spool, and I'm using wildfire beading thread. You can use the 0.006 or the 0.008. Either size would work depending on what you want to do. So to get started, all I'm going to do is cut my thread, and I've cut about 36 inches of beading thread, and I've attached 2 needles to each end of the thread. So I have 2 needles on the 1 thread. Onto the bottom of the thread, I've dropped down my toggle loop that's going to be there attached to my project. The first thing I'm going to do is actually, after dropping it down onto the loop, is I'm going to reinforce it by going through the loop yet again. What this is going to do is create an extra piece of thread going around the loop that's going to keep it so that you have more than 1 thread that's coming off the loop. Once I do that, I'm ready to start my project, and I'm going to start here at the bottom. So you're going to take both needles and your 1 size 8 bead, and you're going to put 1/8 on both needles going in the same direction. And I'm going to let that drop down next to my clasp. It just drops down right there. Next, what I'm going to do is pick up my needles and separate them, putting 1/8 on each needle and letting those drop down next to the clasp as well. So then you're getting a little triangular effect when you look at it. And that's going to be the start of the bracelet. Onto this triangle then of 8s, we're going to add our first rulla. And the rulla is a Czech seed bead that is almost a tubular shape that has the holes running at the top and the bottom. And I'm going to put my needles through both holes of the tila, 1 needle going to the top hole, 1 needle going to the bottom hole, and then I'm going to push that down right against my 8s. And that's going to separate that out a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my zigzag. So I'm actually going to hold my project this way so you can see the zigzag starting to happen. And I'm going to be zigzagging, so the needle that's on the right and the needle that's on the left, I want to keep to their designated sides. And I'm going to be switching my pattern as I go. So on the right hand side, I'm going to start out by putting 1 of my 8 O beads and dropping it down next to my rulla. I'm going to tuck that needle into my bead mat for now and pick up the needle on the left. On the left needle, I'm going to put a size 8, a drop, and a size 8 bead. And let those drop down additionally next to my rulla bead. As you can see here, because there are more beads on the left hand side, when I put the rulla in, it's going to push that teardrop out to the side a little bit, and that's what's going to create that wave as we're going to switch from left to right, adding the teardrops. So the first one here, I added it to the left, and I'm going to take my needles and I'm going to put my rulla bead through both holes again, left needle and right needle, and I'm going to let them drop down next to my size 8s. And that creates that first little wave. Now to create our second wave going the opposite way, and let me separate my needles here. Now on the right needle, I'm going to put the 8/0, the drop, the 8/0, and let that drop down. Needle goes into the mat, and I pick up an 8/0 bead on the left needle. Again, I'm going to go for a ruler now, and I have the ruler on the right needle and the ruler on the left needle. Pulling those needles through, nice and tight, that's going to create my second little wave there. And I'm just going to repeat this back and forth. So on the left needle now, I'm going to put my 8, my drop, and my 8. And on the right needle, I'm going to switch from the last thing that I did and just put one of my 8-0 beads. And then my ruler is going to go on. And the ruler just goes on both needles and drops down next to my project. And that's getting that little wave back and forth with the drops going to either side to get that nice little back and forth design. I'm going to continue that on each side and go back and forth getting that zigzag design. So the bracelet's getting a little bit longer now, and I'm adding more and more beads. One thing you do want to try to do is to keep a fair amount of tension, because that's what's going to enhance that back and forth pattern. And we'll make sure that tension is really nice and tight before we put on the second end for the clasp. But I'm just continuing, adding my beads, going back and forth with those drops versus just an 8 and the drops versus just the 8. I'm going to continue this the whole way till I have about 7 inches, and then I'm going to put on my second half of my clasp, which would be my toggle loop here. So I've reached the end of my desired length here, and it doesn't really matter what you end with. It is helpful for the design if you end with the alternating side that you started with, so that way it doesn't zigzag to one side, but it's not necessary. So if you started where your drop is on the right, you can end where your drop is on the left. That helps, but like I said, not necessary. When you get to the end here, what you want to do is repeat our beginning steps. So in the beginning, we had an 8 on each needle. So I put an 8 on my left needle there, tuck that into the bead mat for a second. I'm going to put an 8 on my right needle, and I'm letting them both drop down next to my last ruler bead. Next, what I'm going to do is take my needles together, and I'm going to put a size 8-0 seed bead, the last of the 8-0s that I'm going to use, through both needles in the same direction, and let those drop down as well. To put on my clasp, I'm going to take my clasp, my loop here, and I'm going both needles, just like I did with the 8, through the same direction, and I'm going to press that down. To make it nice and tight and to keep that curvature, you're going to take both needles again back down through the 8. So we're going now the opposite direction. So I have the needles coming back towards the base of the project, going through that 8 again. And what that's going to do is put 2 pieces of thread through my loop on my clasp. And we're going to pull nice and tight. And let me take my right needle then, or my left needle, doesn't matter, and I'm going to take it back through my project, and I'm going back through the 8 and my ruler bead, and then on the other side I'm going to take my needle back through an 8 and the ruler as well. So I'm just going back through that little triangular space that we created. After I come out of my ruler, all I'm going to do is a simple knot, and I'm going to tie those 2 rulers. So I'm going to tie right over left, left over right, do a nice square knot. So the knot's going to go kind of right next to the ruler. You'll see the thread a tiny bit. Usually with this project and with this color, I probably would have used the green wildfire thread, but I'm doing 2 knots. And you can glue if you're a gluer. If you're not a gluer, you don't have to glue. What I do like to do is take my thread burner, and I'm going to burn close down next to the end, pressing in on the button of the thread burner and then burning down. Turn your project over a little bit and you can fuse those 2 ends together. And you have just a nice little knot there. And it'll be hidden well on your bracelet that you won't even see it. And that's how you're going to go do this zigzag Rulla bead bracelet. And when you put it on, again, it's a nice, just small little bracelet. You can wear multiples at once. You could connect them at the ends and do other ones. The other thing that I wanted to show you is that you can have the opportunity to put on SuperDuos as well and change up the pattern. So you could use SuperDuos. Any kind of flat 2-hole bead will make that work. So there's lots of options and lots of different beads you can use, and lots of different styles that you could do to make it longer and wider, as well as you could make bigger gaps between them by adding different size seed beads. You could use 11s, you could use 6s, so it's really up to you what you want to use to get to the design and which 2-hole beads that you want to use. So thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you learned this cute little bracelet, and it's a good little kind of starter step bracelet for if you have friends that haven't gotten into beading it and you want to introduce them to it. It's a nice simple project that won't frustrate them at all and is very simple and easy to follow. If you have a chance, check out the rest of our YouTube videos, and we'd also love to see you on our Facebook page. You can check us out online at potomacbeads.com and go to our locations page and visit the store nearest you. If you can't get online, you can always shop at thebeadco.com. Thanks a lot for watching.